I want you to imagine a thought that just arrives completely out of nowhere. Like maybe you're standing in line at the grocery store or you're just staring out the window on a train and suddenly it hits you with this force of full body recognition. Like what if you made all of this up?
Oh, yeah. It's a completely dizzying premise. And, to be clear right at the top, we aren't talking about this as like a symptom of dissociation or a person's grip on reality slipping.
Right, right.
We're looking at a fundamental shift in how human beings can interpret their own existence.
Yeah.
It's a completely different lens.
Okay, let's unpack this because today's deep dive is pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources. We're looking at everything from ancient Vedantic philosophy to like modern papers on simulation theory alongside these esoteric traditions, and they're all exploring this profound concept called voluntary incarnation.
Yeah, and in these frameworks, that sudden thought you mentioned, that grocery store moment, it isn't a glitch. It is framed as a flash of original authorship.
Original authorship, I love that.
Right. It's this vertiginous sense that the world you are moving through is a construct you designed yourself. Like you arrived in your specific life, in your specific body, not by accident, and not as some kind of cosmic punishment.
And not just through the indifferent mechanics of biology and chance either.
Exactly. You are here by deliberate, sovereign choice. Adopting this lens isn't just a casual thought experiment. It's presented as a lived orientation.
Meaning it changes how you operate on a daily basis?
Totally. It is a completely different foundational premise. I mean, the nihilist looks around and concludes that nothing matters because nothing is ultimately real or permanent. But the voluntary incarnationist looks at the exact same world and concludes that everything matters precisely because you chose it.
Because you selected this exact, incredibly specific configuration of experiences and storylines from, like, an infinite menu of possibilities.
Yeah, exactly that.
Which, I mean, that begs an immediate logistical question, right? If I actually authored this entire life, if I picked my family, my historical era, my specific challenges, where are my notes?
All right, where's the manual?
Yeah. Why on earth don't I remember doing it? Because the concept of this cosmic amnesia seems like a massive plot hole.
It does sound like one, but the sources address this amnesia not as a tragedy or a flaw in the system. It's actually the core operating system itself.
Okay, wait, how does that work?
Well, think about the mechanics of any genuine experience. The
Yeah.
not knowing is the engine. A game you remember designing in full, where you know every twist, every trap, and every outcome, it ceases to be a game.
Oh, that makes total sense.
That the tension, the discovery, the emotional stakes, all of it relies on the temporary illusion of forgetting.
I compare this to going to, like, a highly immersive escape room. You pay the money, you walk in, the door locks behind you, and you have to figure out how to get out.
Right.
If you kept the answer key in your pocket and just, read the codes off a sheet of paper, the experience is totally ruined. You have to buy into the illusion of the locked room.
That's a perfect analogy. The biological amnesia of birth is simply the door locking behind you, so the experience can actually begin. And human beings have constantly invented new vocabularies to describe this felt sense of something larger moving through ordinary life.
Like going all the way back through history, right?
Exactly. If we trace this idea back, we hit the Vedantic concept of Leela, which translates to divine play. And in the mechanics of Leela, existence isn't a burden. It's an activity undertaken for the sheer delight of it.
By a consciousness that's just so overflowing with its own fullness that it needs nothing except the pleasure of temporarily forgetting what it is and then remembering it through the friction of lived experience.
Yeah, it's exuberant self-expression rather than grim necessity.
And if you strip away the sci-fi gloss of modern simulation theory, isn't it basically pointing to the exact same underlying architecture?
It fundamentally is. When you remove the existential dread from simulation theory, like the fear that we're just lines of code being manipulated by some teenager in another dimension.
Right, the classic matrix anxiety.
Exactly. When you drop that, it reduces to the intuition that the simulator and the simulated share an origin. The data processing of the universe is just consciousness experiencing every possible variable of itself.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
And esoteric traditions take this a step further with the concept of pre-incarnational agreements, or soul contracts. The idea that a version of you sat in council and engineered a specific curriculum.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back hard on this, because tell that to someone dealing with systemic poverty, tell that to someone suffering from a terminal illness, or navigating brutal institutional injustice.
Right, of course.
Claiming, you chose this curriculum that sounds incredibly dismissive. It borders on a privilege-fueled fantasy. Like, how is this not just victim blaming dressed up in spiritual language?
That is the absolute hardest edge of this philosophy, and it's a vital critique to make. What you are describing is the trap of the spiritual bypass.
Which is what exactly?
It's when someone uses spiritual concepts to avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, trauma, or real-world injustices. But the philosophy of voluntary incarnation, when fully understood, actively guards against that bypass. What's fascinating here is that the framework explicitly relies on the game generating genuine stakes and genuine ache.
So it doesn't minimize the pain at all.
Not at all. Pain is completely real. Loss is real. Systemic injustice is a real-world horror that absolutely must be fought.
So how does a person actively suffering hold this framework without it minimizing their pain? Because that seems like a really fine line to walk.
It is, but it's done by redefining the architecture of the soul. In the ultimate cosmic sense, victimhood becomes structurally incoherent. But that does not mean people aren't victims of human crimes or abuses in the material world.
Right, the distinction is in the response.
Exactly. On the level of the soul's architecture, the player who wrote the difficult level into the game cannot be entirely surprised when they encounter it. They don't bypass the pain. They hold it with the suspicion that the pre-incarnational self recognized this specific difficulty as essential.
Not because they wanted to suffer for the sake of suffering, though. I think it's more like an architect stress testing a building. You don't just throw random weather at a structure.
Right, you have a plan.
Yeah, you design specific wind shears and seismic loads to see what the materials are capable of holding. The parts of a narrative that hurt are the parts that force the protagonist to grow, to access capacities they wouldn't have reached in a state of permanent comfort.
That's spot on. And practically speaking, adopting that suspicion causes a massive shift in human psychology. When you view yourself as the author of your world, the neural pathways we use to process trauma actually begin to shift.
Because blame starts to lose its grip.
Yes. This frame places you at the source of your experience rather than at the effect of it. The psychological mechanism here is just profound. When a person shifts from asking, "Why is this happening to me?" to "What is this experience demanding I become?" they move out of the brain's fear center.
The amygdala, right.
Exactly. And they engage the prefrontal cortex, which handles executive function and meeting making.
So it basically hands you your agency back in the exact moment you feel most powerless. The elaborate structures of resentment soften. Like, the annoying coworker or the frustrating landlord stops being a random punishment and becomes an NPC, like a non-player character or a co-player that you drafted to teach you boundary setting or patience.
Which completely flips the script on how we interact with the world.
It really does. But, okay, if life isn't just an endurance test where the only goal is survival, what is the actual point? Because we have this deep cultural bias toward believing that only suffering is profound.
Oh, absolutely. We treat Earth like a mechanism for punishment or, mandatory reform. We view joy as a temporary, slightly guilty break from the real work of existence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources pivot away from the heavy reality of suffering and introduce a radical reorientation. The assertion that fun-like, actual, genuine fun is a legitimate spiritual orientation.
Yes.
Joy is not a distraction from your purpose. It is the point.
Pleasure, delight, curiosity,
Yeah.
play. The sensation of being fully inside an experience that engages every part of you. These are not departures from what you're here to do. They are exactly what you came here to do.
It's like the game was designed to be played, and playing well means playing with full appetite.
Exactly. And this directly addresses the specific modern exhaustion everyone is carrying around right now. It's the exhaustion of living as though you arrived here accidentally and therefore, have to justify taking up space.
Yeah, the sources break that burnout down beautifully. You try to justify your existence through relentless productivity or by achieving moral perfection.
Or by twisting yourself to serve other people's ideas of what a successful life should look like.
Right. You are trying to earn a place in a game you forgot you designed.
Exactly. You're trying to become worthy of an existence that was already an expression of your immense worth just by the sheer act of you choosing it. The voluntary incarnationist looks at modern burnout and recognizes it as a forgetting of the original yes.
You said yes to the whole package, the specific limitations of your body, the recurring themes that follow you from chapter to chapter in your life. which means your instincts are not random.
Not at all. They are highly calibrated instruments.
I mean, think about your persistent hungers, like your obsession with 90s architecture or a specific aesthetic or a particular type of music that just wrecks you in the best way.
We usually just brush those off.
Right, we often dismiss those things as accidents of our childhood conditioning. But in this framework, they are more like a software developer leaving executable code disguised as background scenery. They are the game pointing back to its own intentions.
I love that image. When something in your life lights you up with a disproportionate, almost absurd intensity, that is the game recognizing itself. It's the author surfacing through the character for just a split second to say, yes, this feeling right here is why we made the trip.
But practically speaking, how do we navigate a world packed full of other people who are constantly loudly telling us we are playing the game wrong?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, because we all have to live in society, and society loves a scorekeeper. If I decide my internal joy is my compass, I still have to pay taxes and deal with people who think my choices are ridiculous.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this framework does something fundamentally liberating regarding other people's opinions. If this is your authored realm, then the entire question of whether you are doing it correctly according to external standards just dissolves.
Because those external standards were set by people playing entirely different games.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So they aren't irrelevant, they're just playing by different rules.
Yeah.
Other people are sovereign beings who chose their own incredibly complex games, and they consented to appear in yours, just as you consented to appear in theirs.
It's a staggering web of mutual participation when you think about it.
It really is. But their assessment of your life is not the ultimate measure of your success. The ultimate measure is a single piercing question.
Does this feel like mine?
Yes.
That is the compass, not is this comfortable? Because the things we choose can be brutal and challenging. Comfort and alignment are not the same thing.
They really aren't.
But does this path, does this relationship, does this Tuesday afternoon carry the felt sense of something authored by the version of you that picked it?
Making that distinction relies on something defined as your aesthetic intelligence or your taste. The pre-incarnational you wasn't just generating random variables. It had preferences. It had specific sensibilities and an appetite for certain kinds of beauty and meaning.
So the realm you landed in reflects that taste. The capacities you were given, like the talents or tendencies that show up unbidden, the way you naturally organize your physical space, the specific topics you can read about for hours without getting tired, those are the tools the author knew the character would need.
Yes. So when you are fiercely protecting the things you love and the way you want to live, that isn't vanity. It's the design functioning exactly as intended. It removes the need for apology.
It really does.
When you start answering yes to the question, does this feel like mine? No. You move with the ease of someone who knows they are inside the game they engineered.
So what does this all mean? Pulling these threads together, embracing the framework of the chosen game, means accepting that you are extraordinarily powerful.
Absolutely.
It means fun and delight are not consolation prizes for enduring a hard life. They are the actual compass pointing you true north. And it means your life is yours in the most total, undeniable sense possible.
And, when that thought, what if I made all of this up, arrives in those sudden flashes? Pause. Feel what it would mean if it were true. That flash of recognition is the game doing exactly what you designed it to do. It's the alarm clock you set for yourself before you went to sleep.
If you truly authored everything around you, if every detail of your life reflects your incredibly specific pre-incarnational taste, how does that change the way you look at the mundane frustrations waiting for you tomorrow?
Those little annoyances.
Exactly. What if the boring commute, the spilled coffee on your favorite shirt, or that incredibly awkward conversation you're dreading aren't actually obstacles blocking your path? What if they are the exact, exquisitely specific texture you came all the way across the cosmos just to feel? Think about that the next time you're stuck in traffic. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.